Hey everybody, and thanks for watching Woodcrest Bonsai. Today I'm going to work on some of my Shohin Ilex Shillings. They have not broken dormancy yet, but they're just on the verge. And they all need a little bit of trimming just to remove some excess growth. But before I do that, I want to talk about a term that I use a lot called apical dominance. And what that means, and how we use it to create bonsai. So part of the reason that I love Ilex Shillings is they have very low apical dominance. They are actually a bottom dominant tree. So you don't get this wild, crazy growth. So I've got my chalkboard here. Let's see if I can't raise the camera up a little bit. So, an apically dominant tree, we have our soil line right here, and it can be in a pot or it can be in the ground. So an apically dominant tree, let's say, I didn't bring my eraser with me, so let's say this tree, was up into here somewhere, right? And then we cut it back to turn it into a bonsai. An apically dominant tree will send one more new leader and it'll just go up. And you might get a couple little side branches, but for the most part, you're just going to get another leader that will come almost from the point that you cut, and it'll just shoot like crazy. On the other hand, if you have a bottom dominant tree that also, let's say it was like that, and you cut it like this, what will happen is you'll get a leader here, and a little bit 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 here, and it'll form kind of a tuft like that. So that's the difference between apical dominance and bottom dominance. Now this tree here, if you cut it, so now we're going to give it another trunk like this, right? And then you cut it to here and erase this part. A young tree, it's now got a little bit thicker trunk, it's going to do it again. It's just going to shoot way up, and you'll get some side shoots. It's not like they just produce, but that's how you create bonsai with an apical dominant tree. With a bottom dominant tree, you just don't have that growth, so you don't need to do those major cutbacks as often. So I hope that explains apical dominance versus bottom dominance. And then, of course, there's a phenomenon, and once again, why I didn't bring my eraser, I don't know, is that an old mature tree. So when we have an old mature tree that's, a huge, beautiful bonsai, and even though it's an apical dominant species, when you trim now you're trimming about the same. If you took all the little pieces that you're trimming off and added them up, they'd be about the same as the chop. But now you're not going to get some crazy dominant growth like that. They're going to sprout, and when you have a mature tree. So the older your tree gets and the more of a crown it gets, even apical dominant species will begin to sprout off of all of the branches. Now you may get what's called a water shoot. So a water shoot is, so we have this branch here, and then a water shoot is called that because it usually happens after a very heavy rain. You may get a branch that just shoots like this. Just crazy. And you almost always want to take those off because they are destroying the form of your tree. So apical dominance is really more of something to consider when the trees are young. As they get older and older and older, the tendency for the apex to just shoot like crazy gets less and less and less. So I hope that explained a little bit when I talk about this tree has apical dominance. And this tree does not. And I actually have a couple of examples that I want to show you. Before we begin working on the shillings. One of them is a Ficus philippinensis. So let's zoom in a little bit. Zoom in, thank you. So this was a cutting that rooted beautifully, but you'll notice that the cutting itself was right there. You see that? No, that's because I have it below the frickin' camera. So that was the cutting right there. And then all this new growth. Oh, great. All the new growth from the cutting has all gone like this. Now there's a couple little side shoots, but a tremendous amount of apical dominance. Cutting, the brand new growth just went crazy. Oh, I have to laugh at myself or else I'd be so mad. And this is an azalea, which is another very bottom dominant plant. And we can see we have the trunk, but there's a chop right there. And if you'll notice, nothing has gone crazy like that, and it's popped. There's maybe 8 or 10 little pieces that all popped after this cut. And even with the cut, if we look at the cut straight on, there are 3 different branches that all came from the cut. So that's a tree with very little apical dominance, bottom dominance. So azaleas in nature form fairly irregular, large shrubs that get about 6 or 8 feet high, depending on the variety, because some are dwarf. But they never become trees, and they're usually, even without any trimming at all, they become somewhat of an irregular globe. So now back to the shillings, which is also a bottom dominant tree. So let's get this puppy in the frame. Okay, there we go. So this tree is in a round pot. It's a very beautiful pot. I love the pot. But a round pot has no front, so perfect. So now when we look at this guy, you know, we have an apex up here. These branches here have elongated too much. So, you know, I want the front to be somewhere in here. If I bring the front to about there, that means that the trunk is moving back away from us, but it comes back forward. So that's okay. So this branch here is going to be my first main branch right here. So I want to reduce the stuff that's shooting up. I want to take this guy off because he's going against the grain. And actually there's another little guy right behind it going against the grain. And that one there is also visually. So right away we now have the trunk line accentuated a whole lot better. And then just give this guy another little cut like that. And then up in here, it still needs to develop some. These are young trees. I will not be root pruning them. And I should have root pruned them already, although they're still dormant. And then I have to decide, what do I want to do with all of this stuff here? Because this stuff here is really not part of the tree. Do I keep it as a sacrifice branch or not? Now this is one dilemma you get with trees that are bottom dominant, is that all of these three limbs are all coming off of the same point. So if I leave them to get really thick, I'm going to have a gigantic knob there. So I'm going to take them all off. And I think I can do that all in one fell swoop. There we go. Then we have these two little incidental guys that are unnecessary for the design. And we also have this one here that's coming out of the inside of the curve, which I almost never promote branches coming out of the inside of a curve. So there we go. Right away. Now the top needs some more development. But these are young trees. And I've got so many of these, I may do parts 1 and 2. I may do part 1, 2, and 3, especially since I've already spent the time explaining apical dominance in this video. So there's number 1. He's going to be, I think he's going to be a real nice little tree. This second tree is by far one of my very favorites. I mean, look how big it is. It's only maybe 4 inches high, but look at the nabari on this thing. Beautiful roots, fantastic little fat trunk, and it's basically 360 degrees all the way around. It's just almost what I consider perfect nabari. I mean, look how fat that trunk is, and it's just such a cool little tree. But it does need some work. Like in a perfect world, I want the first main branch to come out of here. So this was a huge chop. Right there. And I'd really love to have a branch, oops, come out of there. But it didn't. So I'm going to take this branch here. First I'm going to remove these two small ones, and then I'm going to reduce this guy, and then I'm going to try to promote this so that the pad is coming out of there, so it looks like it's emerging from the outside of the curve, even though it's way down here. And so once this pad develops and the pad is up in here, it will give you that vision that it has, that it's growing a little bit higher than it actually is. And for most of the rest of this tree, I think I'm just going to give it a little bit of a haircut. I just love this guy. And actually, see this branch right here? I think that branch could come off, because if we take it away, visually it really does nothing to the tree, and it does nothing for the tree if it's on there. So, I'm going to take that guy off. There we go. Now I have a sacrifice branch down here, which is also probably totally unnecessary because the nabari is already magnificent, but I think I'll leave it for now. And this tree is so small that sometimes even just a downward pointing leaf, changing the downward pointing leaf, I don't know why, I'm always moving my trees over to the right. I need like a stick or something, stay there. But this is just another cool little tree. The top needs some development, need to create more pads. But I just love this guy. The nabari is just absolutely beautiful. So he's going to be so much fun to work. So there's number 2. Number 3 is considerably larger than the guy I just showed you. but also a tree that I just really have enjoyed developing. And you can see, like, let's look at the first main branch. You can see all the cuts here that were all coming up that have been all reduced to get the pad. So we have just about a perfect, and it almost has a kind of a northern, almost conifer look to it, even though it's a Shillings. But I like this tree too. I just love its, and the trunk is a little straight, but all of that was softened. As the trunks get thicker, that's another concept that I use a lot, is when I look at a really young tree and it's got a lot of straightness, I know that over time that straightness will soften. So is there anything that even needs to be done with this guy? It looks as though I've already worked this tree. And the first main branch, this part of the first main branch kind of goes back away. So it could use a tiny bit of wire. Or I could just allow this branch here to just come in and take its place. There really is not much else that I want to do with this guy. Another tree that I just really like a lot. The apex is pretty pointy, but it has that perfect triangle. So over time we need to get the apex to be more rounded, which will create the image of an older tree. But another tree that I'm just really enjoying. The next two are actually in organic landscape soil. All the others that I've showed you, and all the others that I all did at the same time. And that's another thing. All these trees were basically grown from cuttings, removed from the cutting tray, planted into training pots, allowed to grow, cut back, planted into the bonsai pots, all pretty much simultaneously. So they are all basically the same age, quote unquote. And so you'll see as we go through them, they all have similar size and thickness and whatnot. That's because they're all what I call brethren. They're all the same. So this one is in a landscape mix, and as such, it has degraded. So you can see how the soil is way low down in the pot. But it also has some interesting nabari. It has a little bit of circling roots right there. So you can see it was in a little 4-inch pot. So it's nothing that really is tremendously annoying for me, but I am going, especially this one right here, this root right here. I'm going to take him off about right there. And then we have another root right here that's shooting across. And then, come on guy, there we go. And then one more is this root right here. I'm going to shorten and take that off. And that looks pretty good. That looks pretty good. And I may actually add a little more soil. As far as the structure of the tree, it's a pretty nice little tree. It has also appeared as though I worked on this in the fall. Now, you know, we're looking at this pot. But this is the front, but I'm thinking maybe the tree, the front of the tree is more like right there. I like the way the branches angle towards us. Over here, this branch is almost straight at 9 o'clock, and this one's coming way forward. So if next time I repot, move it to just about there. I do have this little tuft of growth right here that is shooting totally against the grain, so I'm going to take it off. Completely unnecessary. And yeah, I think the front is going to be good right there. And I just did 2 in the landscape mix, and all the rest got bonsai soil, and it was just kind of an experiment. So, and then this is the second one that's also in totally organic soil. And it could probably use to be shifted in the pot also. And this one could use some work. Once again, I'm going to take these long branches. If this is the first main branch, I want to shorten that growth there. We have some more growth in the back that could also be shortened. Maybe shorten the apex. And right now we have this tree, it comes forward quite a bit. So I would really want the apex to go back a little and then forward. So, you know, I like to have motion this way, but I also like to have motion this way, forward and backwards. So once again, when we take it to there, we see that this guy needs to be shortened tremendously. And then our back branch is also really long. If we go like that, we see the back branch is really long. So now leaving the back branch, even though it's going to be the back branch and not a sacrifice branch, can thicken the trunk. I also have a little bit of gin, which is very rare because Shillings holly has very soft wood, very soft wood. Although it's also very difficult to wire once it gets to about pencil thickness. But very soft wood, so the fact it's holding that piece of gin is pretty amazing. So there we go, there's another one. And this one's also in landscape mix. Still pretty healthy. And look, it didn't grow up above the window screen. You can still see the window screen is right at the bottom of the pot. So shall I do one more? Let's do one more. And the last one that I'm going to do in part one is the runt of the litter. This was the smallest tree. It was also not very healthy. And it wasn't unhealthy, but it just didn't have the robustness of the other ones. Still got a nice little chunky trunk. It has some major chops back in here. I have the rocks on there because it wasn't rooted well. And you know, especially for a tree that's not super healthy, if it gets jostled around, if the roots are getting jostled around, that can really hurt it. As far as style, it's got a long way to go. But I think it has great potential. I really do. This is a kind of a guy where, once again, there's not much. That part died off. So there's not much to do with this guy right now. I just want to keep growing it. There is something. We have this branch right here that is shooting straight at us. And then this part is competing with what's going to be the apex somewhere. So I'm going to take that off. This eye-poking branch could possibly come off too, but a lot of times when a tree is weak, I try not to dwell on the styling. Just let it get healthier. Then you can do the styling. Especially if the styling entails some kind of drastic procedure. Unhealthy trees really need to be brought back to health before you try anything, or before I'm not trying to tell everybody what to do, I'm just trying to show you what I do before I try to do any kind of drastic procedures. Much, much smarter for me to just let them get back to health, then do the styling. So there we go, a little treatise on the difference between apical dominance and bottom dominance. And then a number of very cool little ilex shillings, all Shohin, all the same age. And I will do part 2 and possibly even part 3 because I got a bunch of these guys. So thanks so much for watching. Please subscribe and hit the notification bell and you'll be able to watch these guys continue to develop. And I think really, in even just another year or two, some of these could be just so nice. And I'm really enjoying the anticipation of being able to trim them and train them. And leave a comment. Shillings, if you're in a tropical area, because Shillings will grow through zone 7. which is what, zone 9 is 20 to 30. Zone 8 is 10 to 20, and zone 7 is 0 to 10. So they, in the ground, they're pretty hardy. In a bonsai pot, you're probably going to need to give them some cold protection. But if you have the opportunity to grow shillings, for me, they're one of my favorites because they make that fat little trunk. Another thing I didn't mention is the leaves. These are the adult leaves. Even if a tree was 4 feet high and 5 feet around, the leaves are still no bigger than that. So thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, leave a comment if you like, and we'll do part 2 soon.